We're looking all right. We're here, episode 4. Thank you guys for tuning in, watching, listening, however you may be consuming this. But this week's episode of the pod, fantastic. I get a chance to welcome my dear friend, Chris Gibbons. Chris is, I met Chris, back in 2013, 10 years ago, which is crazy to think about that. But he was my former boss and hired me at Sports Illustrated. It was one of my first opportunities working in the space as a product designer, motion designer, and will always be forever grateful for him sticking his neck out and giving me an opportunity. But had him on, had a great chat. You know, we talked his early upbringing in Atlanta. What was, kind of that initial fire under his, butt for getting him interested in the arts and being an illustrator and just creativity as a whole. How he fell into the whole role with Sports Illustrated and becoming a manager and, through the ups and downs and pluses and minuses of what that can mean. And now his role at Google. He's been at Google for 8-9 years as a manager, working across various teams and various products. And he's a super knowledgeable guy, funny as all hell, candid, lovable. I can't thank him enough for agreeing to come on for this week's episode of Study Hall. So without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Chris Gibbons. Yeah.
You sound like a radio broadcaster.
This space has already gotten me in so much trouble at work. It's not even funny.
Really? Why?
I got boobies behind my shoulders right here. I got a fucking New York City, shooting range poster where, the dude's just holding a gun out.
Yes, love that one. We used to have that. We had that in our garage when I was growing up, where my mom did her target practice, and she put it in the garage. So if anybody wanted to come in, it would be like, "You're gonna get shot."
Target practice is your mom doing in the garage?
No, she did target practice and brought the thing back with her and hung it in the garage, just to let people know that if you try to fuck with us, she will shoot you.
I was literally thinking, I was like, that's got to be the most, it's already crazy, like parent intimidation, which I fucking love.
She just goes out after, her morning coffee and does a little target practice.
Well, yeah. I appreciate you sitting down to do this with me, man. Yeah. You're a fucking rock star in my world. That's all that I know.
Come on.
Nah, for real. You were one of the earlier individuals that obviously gave me even an opportunity to be working in the space that I'm in right now, which forever grateful for that. Don't quite know what the fuck you saw when I came in. It was like showing you this half-ass portfolio of God knows what it was. And you were like, yeah, we'll give this kid a job. Yeah.
No, we, dude, you could see it. You were at the Post? Were you at the New York Post?
All the same, but Daily News.
Daily News. Okay, right. Sorry.
Yeah. Making fucking New York Jets graphics for that shitty ass website.
Yeah, man. No, we saw your stuff and was immediately like, oh, yeah, super talented. And then, of course, we were right. You were absolute rock star.
You're so full of bullshit with that, though. I got it. There's no way that you were like super. I still remember my first project I did for you guys.
Well, I don't even. You don't understand like the level of quality that we saw when we were going out and recruiting. I will just say the bar wasn't particularly high, but dude, the thing I remember. Oh God, I don't even know if I should tell this story.
Please go for it.
God. But I remember there was a guy, we had somebody come in for a job interview, and pardon me if I'm getting my stories conflated here, but there was a guy who came in for an interview. His name was Michael Jackson. and I immediately was like, we cannot hire somebody named Michael Jackson.
I can't even fucking imagine Mike dealing with that.
This is the whole reason, was because I couldn't have Phillips working with somebody named Michael Jackson. I was like, it's just an absolute recipe for disaster. So it was, oh God. I was like, I don't think we can do this. And if I remember correctly, we gave everybody design tests, and this guy, and I think it's Michael Jackson. If Michael Jackson, if you're out there and I'm misrepresenting you, I'm so sorry. But Michael Jackson came back with a pretty nice design test, and then John Cassidy was there.
Yeah.
And he was like, dude, this is a complete ripoff of a tutorial from...
Bro, I remember this story now. I think Johnny told me this. Yes. Yeah.
So I was like, wait, what? And we ended up going, I don't even remember what it was. It was like PSD Toots or something at the time. There was some website, and he just basically took the assignment and completely ran the tutorial, like didn't change anything. And it was like, my guy, come on.
Hold on, my guy, man. Did you call him out, or were you just like, this is...
Oh, yeah. No, I was like, dude, you can't do this in an interview situation. Come on, Michael Jackson. What are we doing here? And really, it's the best thing for both of us that happened, because it would have just ended really badly.
I mean...
Had Phillips gotten a hold of this.
Fucking give that man his flowers, though. That's such a ballsy move to just be like, whatever. Like these dum-dums aren't gonna know. Like, let's just, you know. Oh God, I remember the first project that I did on that team, and it was some bullshit like Go RVing tailgate, sponsorship thing that we had coming, right?
Yeah.
And I guess a little context on like what that team was is we were like this special, like, how would you describe it? It was like a special kind of units.
We called ourselves sort of lovingly this special teams. We were essentially, I know. Oh, we were so cool. But we were essentially an internal agency at Sports Illustrated, and for all the sports brands at Time Inc. And we did everything from motion design to
website builds, building, branding, all that stuff, right?
Ton of Flash stuff.
100%. Yeah. Well, Flash was preceding, I think, me a little bit with some of that, but you guys were jamming on that, and you were leading kind of that whole, crew of misfits. But that first project, I remember Go RVing came in. They're like, we're going to build a one-off website, people with all those dumb things. And I like a fucking novice, I was like, okay, I'm going to fucking come out swinging. And I built the most non-responsive, over the top, like illustrative, like red solo cups. And I remember like, you, Mike, and I think Johnny had like came in, and you're like, let's take a peek at like what you're doing, and you're over my shoulders, and I'm so anxious to show you guys this, and you're like, oh man, like fucking A for effort, but bro, this is a little. What are you doing with this? This isn't good.
Oh my gosh, we had so many of those, like, just horrible projects that would come in. I mean, you remember we had these salespeople that were. My favorite story, and again, I mean, this is where I'm not sure Joe Dodato is going to be listening to this podcast. But
this isn't top 10 in the U.S. already. Come on now, what are we talking?
I love Joe Dodato, that guy. But he would sell stuff like to Gillette. He would go and pitch this idea that we're gonna cover all the swimsuit models in a film of hair, and that you will then turn your cursor into a Gillette razor, and in order to see the photograph of the swimsuit model, you'll need to shave off all of the hair.
Fuck yeah, let's gamify these bitches. Let's go, dude.
We were like, Joe, I don't think the models are going to be okay with you putting hair all over them, my dude.
I love, though. I mean, we've spoken at lengths about this whenever I'm in New York and see you guys, but that was as ridiculous as those projects were for any time of my life, not only professionally, but just personally, like such a fucking staple of a
Yeah.
time for me. I think
Oh,
for all of us.
it really was. And you know, it's one of these things where you don't really realize it until, you know, you've,
No.
you know, gained the hindsight and perspective. But I look back on that stuff now, like there were a couple of years there that were just really some of the best working years of my life. And dude, it all had to do with, well, I think a couple things. It's funny, man. I have people ask me sometimes. I had this one designer at Google ask me one time. She's like, "Have you ever worked on a team that wasn't completely dysfunctional?" And I'm like, let me think. Yeah, and it was that time, you know, it was that
Yeah.
period, and you know, there were a couple things that were working for us, right? We had just the best group of people, you
Yeah.
know, you, Mike, John Z.
Buster,
We had
Min.
Buster,
You
Min. I
had
mean, oh man, God, that
Dom,
guy.
Manish
Yeah,
were even before
Dom
me.
Manish.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and it was just this, you know, and they put us in this corner office, which was like a
The
VP
best.
office,
The best.
but we turned it into like a bunch of cubes,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just, you know, we'd shut that door as soon as the door shut. You knew some shit was going to go down too. You
Oh,
know,
for sure.
like Mike's gonna say something.
Mike's gonna come in fucking super hot of
Yeah.
whatever the fuck it's gonna. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like we had that group, which was amazing. And then, you know, we had trust. We had built this trust with our managers, you know, their managers, and they knew that we were going to do good stuff. And I think the thing that you know, we got a lot of kind of like shitty projects. You know, we got a lot of stuff that was like, you know, build banners or, you know, but then, you know, every now and then we'd be able to say like, okay, we're going to take a couple of these and we're going to really blow them out.
Yeah.
And it was like hunting for those things, and we would just all go above and beyond. We all cared deeply about the craft,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, man, it was like there was just a couple years where there was just this magic.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think back to that time like it was probably the best working time in my whole career.
How did you get into that position though for leading that team?
I mean, there's several of those like sliding door moments that led to that. The first one was, so I started at CNN Sports Illustrated in Atlanta.
Right.
I mean, and the whole, and again, I'm trying not to go too far back. The whole way I
Go.
got that job was bananas, right? Like I had no qualifications. I wasn't even done with college.
Right.
I was going to go get a job as a waiter
Yeah.
because I was like, oh, I'm out of money. I need to go get a job. And so I think I got on monster.com or something like that, saw this job opening for designer at CNN. I was like, what the hell? You know, I'll give it a shot. I've got a portfolio, and they stupidly hired me. I remember at the time I wanted to go make $3 an hour plus tips.
Yeah.
And they were like, you know, I remember the manager was like, the job pays 42,000 a year. And I was like,
Yeah.
are you fucking kidding me? I was like, American dollars?
Not yen. What are we talking here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he brought me back in a couple of like weeks later after we'd been through the process. He's like, actually, it's going to be less. It's going to be like 35. And I was like,
Okay.
that is so good. I'm
Yeah.
still so good with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, and so I worked in Atlanta at CNN Center as a junior editorial designer. And basically, the way I got that job in New York, and on that publishing side as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
the editorial side, was there was a point where my manager, my editorial manager, and I absolutely disagreed on a design. I would not do what he said. He was asking me to do something that I was like, this is a terrible idea and it
Yeah.
will look like shit and I
Yeah.
will not do it. And I was like, I'm going to get fired.
Right.
Because I basically said to my manager, no, I'm not
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
And luckily there was a VP who liked me and was working on he was on the sales and publishing side, and I went to him. I was like, dude, I don't know what to do about this.
Yeah.
And he sided with me. He was like, yeah, you're right. He said, dude, leave that side, come work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did. I went and worked as a solo designer on the publishing side, and then I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. That whole business just grew, right? The whole digital business, and what we started doing, what you started seeing in a lot of these publishing companies, is that they were siphoning business away from the agencies. They were starting to build these little internal agencies, like in that 2008, 2010, 2012 time period.
Mm.
And that's what we did. And we just kind of grew like gangbusters, and they put me in charge. I was just this like knuckleheaded kid. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing.
You're how old at this point?
I mean, I started at CNN when I was 20. I was probably 21, 22.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, no, actually maybe a little older, whatever, like 23, 24, something like that. But then when I moved to New York, I was 27. I was 27, and that's when I sort of started that team. And it was just me. Yeah, man, just totally failed, trial and error. Like, I failed so much. I fucked up so much. And I did things that I was like, I have no business. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I just was like, I'm just going to do this. And, I mean, NBC, we did this partnership with NBC. They were doing a television series, around the swimsuit model search. And they're like, who's going to build the website? And I was like, I'll do it. And I didn't know how to do any of that. I mean, and it was a national television series with a website that needed to be updated dynamically after every show. So like it showed the winners and all this stuff. And I just raised my hand and did all that stuff. And had no business at all. And
well, it had to play well in for you. I mean, it's, there's the kind of the whatever the mantra of like, oh, just fake it till you make it sort of thing, which is a little bit of that. Yeah. But it's also like, there's, you get older and you kind of come to that side of like, dude, there's just power in like knowing or admitting what I don't know just as much on that. But I think when you're young and in your 20s, like, why would you not just be like, dude, right here, like, come on, like, give it, crashes and burns. You're in your 20s. Who cares? You're invincible at that point, right?
Yeah, it was nerve-wracking, but I mean, I think it's through a series of those that I built enough trust with, my manager and the leadership at Sports Illustrated, that they were like, this guy is, he knows his stuff and he's making us money. So, they let me build a team.
Were you originally from, I should know this, you're originally from Atlanta?
So born in Toronto, but grew up in Atlanta. Yeah.
Okay, so grew up in Atlanta. What was that upbringing like? Like, what's the household like for young Chris? If we're talking like 7, 8-year-old Chris running around, what do we got?
It was
mom and dad together.
Mom and dad together.
Okay, and you brother, right?
Brother and sister.
Okay.
Yeah, man. It was. Dysfunctional is I use that is not enough to describe what the situation was.
Right.
I have a very strong-willed mom. Let's just say this: a lot of substance abuse in the Gibbons family.
Yeah.
My mom was challenging. My dad was a great guy, and then my brother and sister were, super problematic.
Were you with the siblings? Because your brother was older, right?
Yeah, I was the youngest.
Okay, so you were the baby of it. Did you gravitate towards one of them more growing up? Of like, like who's your saving grace in that house? If you're having
my dad for sure.
Okay,
for sure.
All right.
Yeah. It was he was universally loved. He was he was a total character. He kind of sounded like Ted Kennedy. He had this Boston accent,
right?
But not like the Southie Boston accent. He was like, more the Ted Kennedy. Like,
I might need an impression right now. Can we get one of these out of these?
I mean, my dad always, you can. My wife hates it when I do this. But he would say, one thing my dad would always say was, Jesus, Christopher. Oh, my boy. And he had these weird sayings, like he'd call us Laddiebuck.
What the fuck's a Laddiebuck?
I don't know. We were all like, My dad passed in 2015, and at his funeral, it was really amazing to see all the people who kind of, this was the kind of stuff that they talked about. Like, what did they say? They said, if they were like, with Peter, if you would graduate, you'd start out as me boy. He'd call you me boy.
Yeah.
He'd say, Christopher, me boy. And then eventually you'd become Laddie Buck. And so he had these like sayings.
Yeah.
But then my mom, she was a total piece of work, like total pistol, man. She, was this woman from Boston who grew up in, the South, and she
Yeah.
was no nonsense. You would tell you like it was. She
Mm-hmm.
did not give a shit. And somebody at my dad's funeral came up to me, and also pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Just pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And this guy came up to me and said, he said, he's like, yeah, really, sorry for your loss, but I wanted to say, I just want to let you know, I really love your mother. She's a great woman. I was like, okay. It's like, that's odd. Most people don't say that.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, okay, thanks. He said, yeah, she never misses an opportunity to tell me to go fuck myself.
People need that though. I think
Yeah.
there's a level of I always find out like when you have deep connections with your friends, like I love when someone can give me shit. When they literally can pull on some of the most insecure things I have, but I know there's an undertone of like I love you, but there's also
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
hey, whatever, you sack of shit. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, totally. I've come to learn that this is, and like again, I this was how my dad operated. He busted everybody's balls all the time, but it came from this very loving place. And he was this like Irish Catholic, grew up in Boston. And I feel like that's just part of that like Irish culture too, where people, they call it like slagging, where they will just like, they will just fuck with you.
Yeah.
My dad called this friend of mine, Brett. He called him Brad on purpose forever. He's just like, hey, Brad.
Such
like,
a disrespectful thing. It's so good.
I'm like, Dad.
So good.
God. Anyway, but yeah, that was.
Either one of your parents artistic?
My dad definitely not.
Okay.
He was a finance guy.
Okay.
I remember coming home with like paintings and him being like, "Oh Jesus, is this good? I don't know." I'm like, "Oh, thanks, Dad."
Yeah.
Super supportive. My mom though, her side of the family was she had it in her. She didn't really practice it very much, but her brother, my uncle, was a textile designer, very, pretty successul guy. He went to RISD, and then
I remember you telling me about this guy before.
Yeah, that whole story is super interesting. And then their father, my mom's dad, was a cartographer. He was and I don't know. I've seen some of his maps, so I don't know everything that, the breadth of his work, but most of the stuff that I saw was more decorative. It was really like he did a lot of maps of Cape Cod that then he would sell and people would like put on their walls, etc. So, I mean, from that end, and then my brother, who was older than me, was super talented, like at sculpting and drawing. Somebody that I always looked at and was like, wow, really impressed. But unfortunately,
when did you come into your own with that? Because you're by far the most naturally gifted person artistically I've ever met.
Come on.
There's no. It's sweet of you to be a little bit like, oh no, wait, it's not me, but it's true.
Stop! Tell me more.
You know it's true. You know it's very true. So I'm curious like at what age did that sort of it like clicked into place?
I guess I was always the kid in the class, I can remember in second grade, that could draw, and I was doing this stuff, I was looking at comics and copying and tracing and just like, like I loved it. And so I always remember being that kid through high school that could draw, and I was super into comics. There's a couple key things that happened to me. There was a comic book store that opened in my neighborhood, and I was there all the time. Like the owner was just like, Jesus, dude.
Do you have a family? Yeah.
Exactly. Why don't you go home? And to the point where he eventually offered me a job because he's like, if you're going to be here all the time, why don't you run the register
Yeah,
for
go
me?
to
And
work.
exactly, I'll give you like $20 or something. So he
Right.
just paid me under the table.
Right.
But what he did is he found there was a local artist by the name of Brian Stelfreeze. You can look him up.
Mm-hmm.
He is an amazing like penciler. He did a ton of like DC covers.
Oh shit.
Dude is sick.
Yeah.
But this is probably when I'm about 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
And he would come into the comic store, and Scott, the guy who ran the comic store, was like, hey, you should sit with this kid
Mm-hmm.
who loves to draw. He's drawing all the time. And so Brian, I mean, honestly, dude, one of the nicest guys. And like, I'm sure he wouldn't even remember me.
Yeah.
But like, this is something that apparently he does. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
mentor artists. He sat down with me like on multiple occasions. He would just come in and be like, here, let me show you how to draw reflections in Thor's helmet. And he was so fucking fast, dude. That guy would be like, and I'm like, what? You know,
Yeah.
like watching him do this. I mean, this is all pre-internet, so like I wasn't exposed to any of this stuff.
Sure.
But to watch somebody with that level of mastery do this was a total like just game changer, light switch moment for me.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, such a good dude. I would go to these Atlanta Comic Cons, and he would be there like drawing pictures for people for like, you know, cash. They'd come up and be like, hey, can you draw me a picture of, you know, Longshot or Wolverine or something? And he would see me and he'd be like, hey, Chris, you know, 13-year-old, 14-year-old Chris. He's like, come up here and sit with me and you can draw too, you know. And I would sit at the table with him while he's sketching for people, and I'd be like drawing my horrible little superheroes. And
That's
I just
huge,
remember thinking,
though.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, what a fucking, that dude was so awesome.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that was like the moment where I was like, oh, like you could do this as a job. This is like, you know, and, you know, also just sort of seeing him, you know, operate and do what he does was like this just like super eye-opening moment for me. And yeah, you know, and then I was a total fuck off in high school, and then by the time I got to my junior year, I was like, oh yeah, I don't want to live with my parents. I'm gonna have to do something. And so that was when, like, I think those two things clicked, you know.
Kind of merged with it.
yeah.
Did you and your brother ever find any like common grounds then once you kind of got into art and him being creative as well, or was it not so
Yeah,
much?
I wish. Unfortunately, no. I mean,
Yeah.
he was, you know, he was pretty, he was troubled.
Yeah.
And so I think we mostly butted heads and fought. And I look back on it now and think of what could have been. And sometimes he and I will talk about this stuff, but he's still, you know, he's still struggling so much. I think it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like the art for him is, you know, he's got health issues, he's got all these other problems. So
right, so it's taking a back seat and all that stuff. Yeah.
It's a bummer because he was a really talented guy.
I mean, runs in the genes, I guess, with it. So,
Yeah.
All right. So, kind of going a little bit forward in this conversation we're having. So, you end up in New York. You're managing this team at a certain point. When did you and Aaron meet? Was this in college before you went to New York, or
Oh man,
your wife?
I've known Erin since I was third grade.
Shit.
Yeah, she lived about 6 houses down from me.
Yeah.
And you know, we were the Gibbons family. We were not well liked in the neighborhood.
No, your mom's fucking blasting handguns in the garage. Apparently,
they were just like doing target practice. My brother he rode motorcycles and would terrorize the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole story about him taking a shit in some girl's car in the neighborhood. You know, it's just. Yeah, we didn't. Let's just say we didn't have the greatest reputation.
Okay, all right.
And
right. So Aaron's staying away.
Yeah, so I mean, Aaron's parents, they lived in it. They had a well-functioning, nice family, you know, that loved each other, you know, and it wasn't like fake. Like they were pretty wholesome and you know, and I think when we started dating, her mom's friend was like, "You do not want your daughter
Don't let
dating
that Gibbons
a
boys."
Gibbons."
Yeah.
you don't want that. And so this has all come out, like I've learned this, in the last couple of years. I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But we basically we were on the same swim team.
Mm-hmm.
There's a picture of us when we were 8 years old, like on
That's
the swim
awesome.
team. But we started officially dating when we were in 10th grade.
Okay, so
Yeah.
she's with you through all of this progression then of like getting the job in Atlanta and making the move to New York, and so she's along for this ride, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. She has been amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's along for the whole thing.
yeah. Okay, so I'm always, and you and I have kind of talked about this again of you're relatively young in your career that they give you the keys to the castle and say go run this team,
Yeah.
and you're doing it at a reputable company. You're living in fucking New York. You have any kids at this point or no?
No, I
Okay.
think, uh, that's also a really interesting story. And again, sorry if I'm taking these on,
No,
on
let's
some
do it.
side quests here, but I remember we were very clear that when Erin got pregnant,
Hmm.
she did not want to work. She was working as a school teacher. She was
Okay.
making very little money in New York City, and it really didn't even make sense. If she was going to
Yeah.
stay home, or sorry, if she was going to go back to work and we were going to get somebody to watch the kids, it
Right.
was like, what's the point? Like we'll
Right.
just take your salary and give it to somebody else. So
Exactly. Yeah.
um, when we found out she was pregnant with Lily, um, we were like, well, that's it for New York. We're leaving. We can't afford to live here on one salary. So we were sort of just resigned to the fact that we were gonna leave New York. And then I got a phone call from the Wall Street Journal, like out of the blue. Like this was like same week, and they offered me some job. I don't even know how they found me. I don't know how they. I don't. Again, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And that started a bidding war between Sports Illustrated and Wall Street Journal.
Those are the
And
best
yeah,
spot to be in.
exactly. And my dad, I remember talking to him at the time. I'm like, "Oh my God, Dad, they're counter offering," and he's like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, okay, play it like this, blah blah
Yeah.
blah." But yeah, anyway, it ended up in a situation where we could then afford. I got such a bump in my salary that they had
Mm-hmm.
to bump my manager up as well. Um,
Holy shnikes.
yeah,
Just so that they wouldn't be belittled by
so
the
I
money
wouldn't be
that you're
out.
making.
So I wouldn't be out earning her.
God
And
damn.
yeah, so it was like this super serendipitous thing that happened, and then that's what sort of allowed us to stay in New York.
If it wasn't going to be New York, where were you thinking you were going to relocate to?
I mean, we'd probably go back to Atlanta because that was where our family was, and that would have
That's fair.
just been awful. God, in hindsight, I'm so thankful for that Wall Street Journal call. Holy crap!
Well, you've talked about the dream where you're like, I just want a cabin. Is it Maine? Is that where it is, or New Hampshire?
Yeah, anywhere in the Northeast. So,
Northeast.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're like just plop me there, and I'm good. So I didn't know if you guys even at that time were like, we're going north, bro. Just go. But
Dude,
yeah,
that was mostly at the end of SI in 2014, 2015. That last 2 years was so brutal, man.
yeah. Well, then I also love it too because you leave, you get, and we'll loop back around, but you leave, you get this awesome gig at Google. Your predecessor that comes in, it's Fat Chris. It's just Chris with a K. And I remember Mike and John are just like, are you fucking kidding me with this guy? Like, dude, what a boob! Like, oh,
I,
he was the worst.
I never met him, but I heard that he would fall asleep in his office.
He'd snore. You'd literally be in meetings with him, and he would like dip out, and you're kind of like, am I that boring? Like, what are we doing here? He was,
Man.
but all right. So you get the bump. You and Aaron are staying in New York and everything.
No, we ended up going to California for 2 years.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, yeah. The whole move to New York took us out to the Bay Area.
For
And
work
for work,
or
yeah, for Google, we moved to Mountain View.
oh, sorry, I meant when the Wall Street had kind of
Oh,
came,
sorry,
you were
sorry.
young
Yeah,
and all
yeah,
that stuff. Yeah. But so you're at that point in time, Wall Street Journal came in, you got this huge pay bump, and then was that then kind of I'm trying to like place dates and stuff. Was that kind of the genesis for then what the team that I came into over?
yeah.
Okay, that's what it
Yep,
progressed
that
into.
was it. That was kind of the turning point. So, that all, like you said, I mean, that kind of all happened right when Lily, when we found out Erin was pregnant with Lily. I
Right.
kind of like took over that team. Um, you know, I often get asked like, when did you become a leader, or when did you step into your leadership, or
Oh, that's
like,
question number 4 that I have here. Okay,
damn
great.
it,
Let's go on
damn
it.
it, damn it. This is usually in some kind of Google training about leadership or
Of
something, and I'm like,
course.
so this is my stock answer.
Yeah,
But there
let's
was
go.
like, it was all around that time
Hmm.
that I remember, I had this manager, Marcella. I absolutely loved Marcella. Was like really my mentor. She taught me everything I needed to know about being like ethical, being like work ethic. And she was just like, I would say Marcella was like fiercely good, and especially in an environment where it was salespeople, and a lot of the mode of operation was just fear and lies. That was how, like,
Mm.
that's how we operated in this sales organization, right?
Hmm.
And Marcella was this like beacon of of like goodness.
Right.
And I think, so I learned so much from her. I really respect her. And there was a moment where I failed. I dropped the ball on something. We missed a deadline and we did not deliver to a client, and it was completely on me. It was through like my mismanagement or disorganization that happened, and I let her down. And like, I looked her in the eyes, and I saw the disappointment in her, right? And I just was like, this will never happen again, never again. And
Yeah.
like, that was the moment where I was like, I can't. It isn't about me. It isn't about my ego or my you know I wasn't looking inward anymore at
Yeah.
myself. I was like, I have to help and support the people that I care about on this team.
Hmm.
And that has always been the thing for me as a leader. Is it's like, it's very little, it has nothing to do with like I don't really get that much out of it, but it's more about like, how do you help the people around you, and how do you help those. And so like, I I just had to rethink how I operated.
Right.
And I got crazy organized. I was like more proactive about like, all right, you knuckleheads, never assume that people have anything done or they're doing their
Hmm.
work. You go and you make sure you check those boxes. Like, I really had to become much more like, proactive and just stronger willed, in order to make sure things were getting done. So I didn't let Marcella down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And since I've known, I mean, as a manager, I think that you are that. You've always been. You're really good of like cutting through the bullshit. Let's understand what the problem is that we're trying to figure out, and then how do we actionably go about this. But it almost, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong on this, it almost feels like there's like a bit of maybe your mom attached to that, of like just like calling a spade a little bit. And sometimes that's not a bad thing, because
Yeah.
obviously you're not going over aggressive with like, hey, jerk off or whatever, like go do this. Like you have a professionalism to you, but you do, like, I've known you to do that, and you're very good of being like, we need to, like, come on, like boom boom, like let's go.
Yeah.
um I don't know, it seems like something
Yeah, yeah,
talking
I
about your
think
mom.
there's, yeah, my wife tells me all the time I got a little Carol in me.
Yeah,
But
your mom was
no,
Carol.
yeah, Carol.
Oh, mine too, man. Carol and
Really?
Carol,
Oh, the
yeah.
Carols. Well,
But
I think, yeah, it's true. I think with it's hard for me to do that advocacy for myself even to this day. Like, I just got finished, like, I got to write all these like performance reviews at Google's and stuff. And it's much easier for me to do that for other people. It's very difficult for me to do it for myself. I literally hate it. I do not want to be like, oh, here's what I did and I'm so great. I hate it. But when you're fighting for other people, that is where I think the Carol comes out a little bit. Like, I
yeah,
can tap into that and be like, look, you're not gonna fuck over my team.
yeah,
They're not going to be here until all hours because of your lack of planning.
right.
That's where I think I can, yeah, I could dip into it.
When so we had the team at SI, right? The special units kind of agency team. My tenure from there, that last year and a half, 2 years, is when we made this transition to their dedicated product team. Like finally, the old whites of that business were like, oh, there's this thing called the internet and mobile phones, and we need to maybe readjust our business plan to meet users where they are now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we kind of became that product team. You can go as short of an answer on this as you want, or as long-winded as you want. What was the downfall for you? Because I feel like that for most of us, as exciting as that was then it was a ticking time bomb for all of us to be like, we're out.
Yep, yep, yep. Oh man, that whole time period was so fucked up, dude. The whole thing started with Turner got the rights to March Madness. So Turner Sports got the rights to the March Madness, like the television rights to March Madness.
Mm-hmm.
And that blew everything up. So they became then the big sports brand within, at that point, I guess it was Time Inc. And they came in and they just said, Sports Illustrated, we're going to take your entire sales team. They did all this weird shit. They reorganized this. It was like pulling out the heart of SI's like digital business. It was just, I don't even, still to this day, I'm like, what the fuck? But it was this really weird reorg that failed miserably. It lasted for about a year. We really enjoyed a good time. Like what ended up happening to our team is we got connected to the print editorial team. This is when we started working with guys like Terry McDonald, who was amazing. But when that all inevitably failed, they brought in the GM, Jim, and built a proper product organization.
Right.
So we stopped being an agency. We stopped being creative design, like digital design agency, and we started becoming this this product team.
It was product driven, right? Yeah.
And to me, Jim just wanted my team. He wanted all the designers, and the offer to me was like, you come over and you take over product. So for me, the downfall was moving from design to product.
Right.
That was miserable.
Yeah. That guy was a fucking cuck too. I'm not ashamed to say that. Whatever.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, honestly, but for the beginning stages of that team, like, cause I got introduced to Heather. Like Heather came in for our team, and Heather. Cesno got brought over, and like he's coming on here at some point. I got and Heather too. I need to reach out to her. But like the early stages of that team, there was still like all these, for me at least, new people coming in that I really cherish and love, and just great fucking individuals. And there was a lot of excitement and fun with it. It was just you could start to see the transit. I just remember again, even the swimsuit, one of the swimsuit apps for 1 year, and I don't remember exactly what the lineage was, but the request came down to John, myself, and Mike, and they're like, we want you guys to kind of like go start strategizing of like what this could be. And I didn't really think any of us had an idea that like, oh, you kind of have to put together a cold pitch. Like we kind of took it as like, oh, okay, there's only a handful of us here that can do this anyhow. So like, all right, so we're going to start doing this. Dude, we had this like concept that I felt like between the three of us was in unison, and it felt like it worked, and it was maybe a safer play in some regards, but it was like their first time of doing a swimsuit. I just remember Jim came into one of these meetings in Mike's office and looked at this, and we did our spiel, and I was still so green at that point. I had no professional etiquette at time to time, and so I'm sure I said something inappropriate to Jim, but he was just poo-pooed it. He was just like, absolutely not. He was like, I want, this was like when Tinder was big. He's like, I want Tinder. I want dudes, greasy dudes swiping on babes and all this stuff. And we're like, the fuck? Like what? Like, even if that's the right move, it was just the way that it was communicated to us, and I think I just remember that being like the first of such a defeating moment for me, being like, I what am I doing here right now? This is,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. It all just so quickly went downhill. I mean,
yeah,
my recollection was I got moved out of the design stuff and then
hmm
got moved into a bunch of the product stuff. So my recollection of that time was fighting with the ad like central ad teams at Time
hmm
Inc. who were debating between this is so boring viewability and fucking I don't even remnant ads. I remember it was a
right.
remnant ad team. You know those
I have no
horrible
clue what that
ads
means.
that are like they're like it was Outbrain. It's those shit ads at the bottom of all
Oh
the things that they're
yes,
that it's just like community.
uh huh,
They're bottom of the barrel 2 cent ads, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
they're
yeah,
all about ad impressions. But then we had this team that cared about like viewable ads, high quality display ads. And so they would fight and they'd be like, no, we want impressions. And the other one would be like, no, we want views.
hmm
And we would just, as the product team, like we would make one incremental change and the fucking everybody would go ballistic. Oh
yeah,
my God, the impressions have dropped, blah, blah, blah. So the way it ended up for me was it was just like, the print revenue was going down.
yep,
They were looking for digital to make up that revenue. It was
hmm
never going to happen,
hmm
and it was a race to the bottom to get as many ads as you could onto these pages, which completely killed our user experience, and
yep,
it made everybody unhappy. Edit was pissed. The various ads teams were pissed, and so my job was to come in every day and just be like, who am I going to like make less pissed off today because everybody is yelling all the time at me to change and fix, and there is no fix. It's fucked. We're fucked. We're on this trajectory down. And
yeah,
so it was just misery. It was just absolute misery. Nobody was happy. Everybody was pissed off. We had Jim who was just contentious with everybody. Nobody liked him. It was just like that last year was like, this is awful. So going from what we had at this like agency creative like you know camaraderie, we
uh
all
huh,
were just like together, you know trying to like help each other and
yep.
and collaborate, and then going into this like pure like fucking stew of misery. Was like, dude, I think I told Aaron at one point, I was like, I don't have another job. I don't give a shit. I just want to, I'm going to leave. I just
Yeah,
can't take it.
how are you standing in the box on those meetings? Like I think you and I are pretty similar of brain's work, and if at the end of the day, if everything else is put aside, if we could just make art, that we would be
Yeah.
very happy in that space, right? So how is Chris Gibbons sitting up going in every day, and I'm like, I'm just going to be getting yelled at.
Yeah.
I'm booked from morning, to evening. Like, what's your? I mean, your headspace has to be miserable.
Yeah, man. I mean, I honestly, I don't even think I was considering another job at that point. Like
Hmm.
I just didn't want to do it. I
You
was
just
like, I'm
like
so
no
done.
job. Yeah,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
yeah.
And dude, I remember we would put in like insane hours. I remember getting cars home from, the time life building at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, right? And I still remember that halal cart had like a fucking line around the block at like three
So
o'clock in
good,
the
dude.
morning. I
It's so
was
good.
like,
As soon
what?
as as soon as they'd bring out the blue trash can full of chicken, I was like, fucking dude,
Let's do this.
let's
Uh,
go, dude.
so, but like, we were, and I think I had young kids at the time, and there was a
Hmm.
point where I just said, this is not like, it's not on me. There's nothing I can do about this. And so I think there was a point where I just said, I'm going to clock in, I'm going to clock out, and if work doesn't get done, work doesn't get done.
Yeah.
And if they want to fucking fire me, let them do it. And you know what's interesting is like, it, this is going to sound kind of, this is like a office space moment, where they're like, where they're asking him like, I think they say, and the guy's name in that movie, by the way, Ron
Uh,
Livingston's character in Office Space, his name is Peter Gibbons. That's my dad. Um,
Is it really? I didn't.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah. He picks
amazing.
up the phone at one point. He's like, Peter Gibbons speaking, and I was
He
like, oh,
does.
come on.
Yeah.
I was like, what the fuck is this movie?
Yeah.
But they ask him. The two Bobs are talking to him, and they're
Yeah.
like, working or hardly working or something like that, and
Yeah.
they say something like, this guy is management material, right?
Yeah.
Because he just doesn't give a shit
He doesn't give a
anymore.
shit. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like there's a point where, and I know this is gonna sound goofy, but like I was broken at that last year at
Yeah.
SI. Like it broke me. Like
Yeah.
I before that tried to keep everything handled. Like I tried to have everything planned, everything handled.
Yeah.
And I couldn't. It got to a point where I just couldn't.
Yeah.
It was humanly impossible. Um, and I actually think that has served me well, right? Like I had to get to that point because like as a manager now where when you're in those situations where you have so much more than you can do, you have to triage, you have to delegate, you have to like and you have to be willing to say there are some things that I'm going to have to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think prior to that, I was like, no, nothing will fall through the cracks. I will do everything, the smallest things, inbox zero. I will have everything will be perfect. And I feel like in some ways, weirdly enough, that breaking point maybe made me a better manager.
Well, it sounds like it's like your full circle moment. It's like your Marcella moment, right? Where you're like, I'm never letting her down again. I'm going to make sure I tick all the boxes. And then you complete that by being like, I would imagine there's a point for effort, like the effort, obviously, but like at the end of the day, the ship's not going to crumble if it's like this,
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, I mean, those last few years were challenging, and I remember going, I think the guy's name was Scott Havens or something like that. I just remember waiting until I had my bonus in the bank, and that next morning I went and was like,
yep.
And he said, let me guess, you're giving me your 2 weeks. I was like, you got it.
Yep. Don't be dumb. Don't be dumb.
glorious moment that I leaving that sort of that misery.
And you've been at Google now for how many years?
Gosh, it'll be 9 years in March.
Okay.
Yeah, and
similar, like if you're similar role, or if you like it. Again, I'm already an idiot, but talk to me like I'm an idiot. How would you describe like what your job is at this moment?
So today I manage a UX team. We're about 25. Research, design, content, and writing, and we are focused on like the kids and family infrastructure and products at Google. So essentially, like we have two sides of our business. One where we create a lot of the infrastructure. So this is like supervision. It's just somewhat boring, but it's like if you go and you create a Google account and you indicate that you're under the age of consent, if you say I'm 8 years old, then that's all us. We own all of that infrastructure, but then we also build experiences for kids on top of that. We work with teams to build features for kids, so like we're working with payments to build payment focused features for kids, we work with like Dialer and the contacts team to make sure like we can build things like trusted contacts so parents can set, like who their kids can contact, things like that. So we work with other teams to build features. We build our own stuff, and then we kind of like own all this infrastructure. So
got our 8-year-old kids creating Google accounts now. Is this?
Well, yeah, it's getting crazy.
I was just say I'm not there yet with Joe, so I don't know what that age is going to be that I have to go. Oh, God,
yeah, it's typically like if you buy a tablet for your kid, people will sign in and create an account, for their kid.
That makes sense with it. Yeah.
All
right. And you mentioned earlier, you'd made the move. You made a move to San Francisco with the job at Google, but I have to ask you, because it's still one of the fucking craziest. When you're in New York, you're still at SI. I know you this time. All three of the kids they're born, they're running around.
Yeah.
Can you please describe what your living situation was in Manhattan at a certain point? Because this is the most bonkers thing I think I've ever heard in my life. And kudos to you and Aaron for making this work.
Yeah, dude, we were, as I said, we bought this little apartment. a one bedroom right when Lily was born in
Hmm.
2006,
Which is your
2007.
oldest, right?
Yeah, and that is right before the market crashed, and
Mm-hmm.
then the whole real estate market takes a total dive.
Mm-hmm.
We are underwater in our mortgage. We're in a little one bedroom apartment, and we just keep having kids like a bunch
Yeah.
of fucking knuckleheads. And yeah, and at some point we have three kids in a one bedroom apartment with a dog, and
Yeah.
there was a little breakfast nook that was like off
Uh-huh.
the kitchen. We converted that into a bedroom for the kids. It had a little curtain, and it was so small that you couldn't move a bed in. We had to take
Yeah.
the bed apart and like rebuild the bed in
Did you do
place.
bunk beds?
We had bunk beds,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
so it was like there. It was like a little submarine. They were the bunk beds were so small, like the kids would wake up and like bonk their head. So we had them in there, and then we had Jane,
Yeah.
and Jane was a happy accident.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember my wife throwing the pregnancy test at me. I would think I was asleep on the couch playing. I'd fallen asleep playing some video game or something. She walks in, and is like, "What did you do?" Um, and then yeah, so Jane is born, and we have her in a mini crib in our bedroom. And I just remember thinking, like, you can see Jane outgrowing the mini crib. Like, we've got like this much room on
Of a
either
gap.
end of the mini crib, where I'm like, pretty soon she's gonna be too big.
Bro, where
Uh,
are you finding the energy? I love dad life's awesome. I fucking love it. But you're three kids. You're dealing with like God knows what at work. Where the fuck are you finding the energy?
oh my god. I mean, a lot of it is Erin. I got to be honest, man. This
Oh,
is the thing: is she is an angel,
yeah.
and she knew she wanted to be home with the kids. She's the type of person that's like, I don't want to miss a second. And so she wanted to be with the kids, and yeah, man. I mean, I would never, ever, ever be able to do what I did without her. Right? She is absolute, the key to all of this.
That's
So
beautiful.
um, yeah, man. I mean, like, my relationship with my kids, and we've talked a little bit about this, but like, I've always we've Aaron and I have always wanted to raise like a very creative family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is the one thing that I kind of, my role was like, Erin did everything. She God, man, I mean, I remember her fucking kid strapped to her. She's got a baby in a stroller, and then, another one on a scooter, and then she's got the dog, and she's like, she's just doing it all, man. My like main contribution, obviously, like trying to help out wherever I could, but my main
Yeah.
contribution was always trying to infuse that like creativity, music, art, anything, right, to like with my kids.
Yeah.
And this is something that she and I again have been very intentional about, and tried to kind of build into our family. So yeah, the answer is, couldn't have done it without Aaron. And my main role was like, you handle all the creativity stuff, and sitting down and drawing with them and all that.
How much do you think it would have taken a backseat if you're not in New York? If you would have left at that juncture, and whether it was Atlanta or some other place, but you're not in that city.
Golly, that's a great question.
Because
We
obviously, yeah, you have it in you, but living there myself, you've been there much longer, but that has to impact that.
absolutely, like, that was the whole reason we came back from California. Like, we moved to California, and it was absent, completely absent. That whole creative life was gone. We live in a neighborhood. We're way up. We call it upstate Manhattan. We're up on 190th Street, but it was a pretty like affordable place, and well situated to Broadway. So you have a lot of musicians, opera singers, Broadway actors, dancers. Those are the people who live in our neighborhood, right?
That's
And
so cool.
those are the people that are in our school community. So
Hmm.
they have built a school community where it's like, we have film festivals, we have variety shows and
Hmm.
talent shows, and it's just constant creativity, right? And
Hmm.
we absolutely loved that. And we just stepped in it, man. We didn't do it on purpose. We totally fumbled into it.
Yeah.
And then when we moved to California, this was the thing that was immediately clear, that community was gone.
Mm.
We were like, shit, like, we felt that so deeply,
Yeah.
and and then when we had the chance to come back, we jumped on it. I will say that having teenagers in New York City, totally different ball of wax.
You've told me some wild stories with it. Wild, but it's also, I've got to imagine though, it's just contextual. Like kids are going to be wild where the hell they are,
Yeah,
right?
and this
Like,
is the thing. Yeah, Aaron's like, they got all this shit in the suburbs too.
yeah,
So
exactly, exactly with it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, all right. So you've been at Google now. How has big tech felt to you? Of you've kind of run the gamut. You've been within publication world for a long time, and obviously you're still at Google. So has there been much of a transition in terms of the way that now you're looking at your role as a manager and looking at product design and all that stuff of being in tech, whether for good, for bad, more of
Yeah.
the same?
Gosh, man. This is a whole podcast right here. Just the answer to this question.
Bro, we can just skip work as long as we want today and just keep talking about this. It's a holiday season. Come on now.
Dude, I really have ups and downs with tech. Like I
Yeah.
feel like my career at Google has been trying to sort of like, honestly, man, it's been trying to find what we had at SI. I feel like that, like as I reflect on it, that is my hunt all the time, trying to find teams who have a clear mission, trust, and are talented and like work well together.
Can it happen, do you think?
Man, I've experienced it for very short bursts. At Google, I had 1 6-month period where that was the case, but beyond that, I've been there 9 years now.
Yeah, I think a little bit of the secret sauce for that time was as much as we talked about that the projects might have been kind of a little in the clouds and whatever kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
But because I think the expectations from the outside internal teams were a little bit lower, but we knew we were all a group that wanted to strive and push one another, that we just could creatively kind of go make what we wanted to make in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But in these these big companies, I mean, what I always fall into, which is such a difficult thing, is there's so many teams working on similar problems and nobody's communicating. So the reality of, yeah, I might be able to spin up an awesome project, but like this is never going to see the light of the day, because as soon as I have to share this with any partnering teams or whoever else has to get involved, like right in the trash can it's going to go.
Yeah.
So I was super curious if you actually think that can happen.
Yeah. I mean, I have not seen it be successful. My experience is exactly your own, which is, what's funny, man, is like this has become my role on so many teams, is trying to tell the story, the narrative of how all of this is going to work together, right? And so that ability to draw, that, like, I went to school for 3D animation, and like, it was, like I just love storytelling. I'm still to this day, like I love it. Anyway, so like, but that skill set, which I did not use it, maybe a little bit at SI, but like that was not the core skill set I was using at my previous roles. When I have come over to Google, that's the skill set that I ended up having to lean on more than anything. Is consensus building, storytelling, like all that stuff. And yeah, man, it's exhausting because you do that enough and you stay at that super high level, and when things don't happen, it just feels like, what am I doing, man? You look back at like 4 or 5 years of your working life and you're like, what have I even accomplished?
Yeah, besides a paycheck.
Yeah. It's like, dude, my portfolio now, I mean, it's like,
whatever, dude. My portfolio got taken over by some Russian porn site, so please don't go to nicklanzillo.com.
But I want to go check it out right after this.
Exactly, that's all you need. Maybe it expired at some point, but no, it's true. It's I don't know. I've sometimes I'm always like, I gotta stop bitching to Lex about this stuff, because I'll like just have a day and I'm I'm like, bro, what am I doing? And I feel like such I don't know if elitist is the right way to put it, but just, I mean, again, like I earn a great
I know,
living. I have
I
a
know,
ton of flexibility, but there is a certain level of energy that just gets taken out of you,
dude.
whether on a daily or over time, that you just start to go, like, what
Yeah.
is this?
So, so I have again, I don't, shit, I don't even know. I'm so old at this point. I don't even know what ideas are my own anymore, what I've
Mhm.
recycled. But I have this, I have this metaphor for this, and
Yeah.
which is like, for me, Google feels like I'm a zoo animal.
Mm.
I live in I live in a protected environment. I'm fed every day. I have everything I want. But the thing is that like I'm in a fenced in area,
Hmm.
and I want to run, dude.
Yeah, bro.
And like there is an instinct in me which is just like I I want that fight. I
Yeah.
want that. I loved being in a position where I was like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah.
And I, like being challenged, working with people who are challenging you.
Hmm.
Google feels like this sanitized, safe, everybody's so nice. And
Toxic
it's like
positivity.
100% my favorite word. My
Yep.
favorite, like it is. And so it just feels like this very safe, sterile environment. And
Yeah.
like, and as I get older, I am becoming less and less, I have less and less patience for it.
Yeah.
But I've got these three kids. I've got this fucking mortgage now, and what am I gonna do? Be like, okay, honey, I'm busting out of the zoo. Let's go
I
live in
mean,
the woods.
is there a part of you that's like you're trying to figure that out? That you're
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Nick, you're an inspiration to me, man.
Well, that's too sweet. I don't know what I'm inspiring folks with, but I appreciate that.
But no, I mean, like, I think you and I have very similar conversations with our spouses. This is the thing that occupies my thoughts the like majority of the time. This is where my
Hmm.
head is.
I don't know the answer. I definitely don't, and I have less years and experience than you do in dealing with this. But I think the only thing that I do know is it sounds so corny, but like you just bet on yourself.
Yeah,
After a long enough time of having people that I trust and I look up to enough of being like, and I've dealt with my own shit and but of having folks say like, oh, I never worried about you. Like I've never worried about you. You'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. And so after a while, I kind of have to lean into that and go, okay, well, if I have a ton of reservations because of leaving the safety net of the paycheck
yeah,
and like you said, all
hmm
those things, mortgage, keeping up with the family, all that, but if people seem to think I can figure it out and I've shown that enough over the years, then maybe I can figure it out again. And I think it is a personality trait. You hit on it of like you miss being challenged. Like I love the hustle. I
yeah.
love the fact even doing this, like I'm going to get like six people to watch this sort of thing. Like who cares? Like I like the fact of okay, I'm going to craft a new
I
idea.
love that you're doing this. I
I
love it.
I mean it's fun. It's fun for
Yeah,
me. I like I always I have been probably quoted a couple of times in these pods of talking about Rick Rubin, but he talked about this whole idea of what's more the chase for artists? Is it the act of making something, or is it the like being in that state where creativity can be fostered? And I think it's the latter. I think it's that. I think
100%.
it's being in that weird like gray area of I got an idea and I'm feeling hyped on this and I just want to go execute because I know as soon as I get done doing it, I'm going to be like, well, this is a piece of shit. This isn't good
Yeah,
enough.
yeah. No, no, and
But
and yeah, and at tech, what ends up happening is you get into that state enough,
yeah,
and you get jerked out of it, or it goes nowhere. You just get
hmm
jerked around, and you eventually get to the point where you're like, this is all bullshit.
yeah,
Like, and so that flow state for me, like that is it, man. That's my drug.
yeah,
Like that that thing that we had at SI those couple of years, that was where that was it, man. I never hated coming to work. I
nope,
was like I was like totally like on the train sketching ideas. How will the logo look? What will this? But I mean, like it
hmm
was just a constant state of like, and And now it is like sometimes you get into it, but then you realize, oh, exactly like you said, you have to have all of these approvals and all of this consensus, and it
Yeah.
ends up going nowhere. It ends up taking too long. And you do that enough times, and you're just kind of like fucking bitter,
Yeah,
jaded.
I'm now at a state where it's just, time of doing it and level of seniority. But the now what I'm expected to do are the things that I'm not good at. And like I'm a dummy. I'm a dumb kid on a lot of stuff. So it's like the now that like, oh, your seniority and this leadership and really need you to drive. I'm like, dude, I like no, I can't. I have a hard time walking that walk and talking that talk of coming in here and being like, well, our DAUs implemented over the stigmatized. No, 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 no. I'm just like, can we? What is DA or daily active
Yeah.
user? Okay, can we just speak some plain fucking English? Like,
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
horrible with that, and that's where like I get in these weird phases now where it's the expectations are there for me, and then I mean, right before I left Google, I mean, God, I had like a panic attack one day in front of Lex, and I'm like, fuck this, dude. Like, what is going on? It's just,
Yeah.
no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no.
No, dude, a couple months ago, like, basically, like, my brain just stopped working. I think
Hmm.
my body was just like, okay, like, I think we're done.
Yeah.
Um, and, yeah, man, it was like, it was really scary. I mean, it ended up being like these stroke-like symptoms, and my wife was like, "Okay, we're going to the emergency room."
Jesus,
Um,
dude.
and so like it ended up, they think it was like an atypical migraine, but it's like you're under all the stress all the time, right?
Right.
You're not eating right, not sleeping, like all the shit, right? And
My whole thing is trying to get to a spot of where I'm at a level of comfortability with taking a year. I'm gonna dedicate a year and I'm quitting and I gotta just figure this out with health insurance and paying the
yeah,
bills. I mean, but I again I'm gonna bet on myself. If other people think I can do it, I'm gonna bet on myself and see what comes of it. But
Nick, you and we need to talk more, man,
we
because
should.
like,
I'm
because
always, dude. I'm here with the boobs. That's what I'm just doing. I'm just hanging out
you,
here. So
I love
fucking.
I love that. I love that so much. Because this is the thing, you and I are on the same, we're like, I think we're on the same exact path, right? This
Mm-hmm.
is this is like, and I'm struggling and thinking about the same things, which is like, okay, like what are the practical aspects of like, okay, I got 3 kids, I'm going to have to figure out insurance. How do you think about college? Like, and we have both, I'm sure, like from a tech standpoint, have like similar financial,
Well,
challenges.
I thought you were gonna say challenge. I was gonna say, well, you've been doing it longer than I have. You're more your bank is probably stocked more than mine is. But yeah,
Well, but I also live in New York City and have 3 children, so
this is true. I live out in the fucking sticks of Sellersburg, Indiana, so this is true. But pay no mind, or whatever the expression. Not pay no mind. What's the expression? Uh, I don't know. My wife doesn't want to stay here, so
yeah,
we are coming back to you got to be dropping cash to live someplace. So it's yeah, that's a whole other thing, dude. It's like again, you're, and then yeah, I get into weird things of like, which I hate because I'm not that, but of like gender norms of like, oh, I'm the father, I'm the
yeah,
husband, I gotta da
yeah,
da da,
yeah.
and it's like, fuck,
Yep, yep. You
I
get
don't
onto
know.
all that shit.
I
All
don't
that
know.
shit.
I'm just gonna
Yep.
fucking do hair braids and make weird jewelry in my garage. Like maybe that's
Yeah.
what you signed up for, Lex. So
Yeah, I think about that all the time. I'm like, and what are my wife parents gonna think if I'm like, if I quit my job, they're gonna be like, what the fuck is this guy doing? Like,
I I think you
anyway.
have to get to a spot where you don't care. I think
Yeah,
you
I know.
care about the people that depend on you, but the other folks you just go, it's just noise at this point. Um,
Yeah. Anyway.
Are- I was talking about tech, all this stuff. When you had just put me in touch with again that young girl's at your daughter's school, and I chatted with her the other day.
Yeah.
When you have young creatives, I don't know how you want to quantify them as designers or this and that, but they're thinking about getting into tech, or even at Google. You talk about you're in these roles where you speak to young folks. Like what what advice are you giving them? Is this something that is you encourage, or do or at least putting up a little bit of like, hey, things to be aware of, like notice the red flags along the road, or
Yeah.
like what's your
God,
perspective
man.
on that for young folks? Like if one of your kids is like, Dad, I want to follow in your footsteps on this.
Oh God. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, it's funny because after I spoke with her, Lily, because Lily and I were touring a school when we
Hmm.
met this young woman who
Yeah.
was she was a resident assistant at one of the dorms that
Hmm.
we were touring,
Nice.
and got to chatting, and she was super kind
She's
and
very sweet. Yeah.
yeah, super nice young woman. And
Yep.
after that, like Lil, so I'm looking, I am actively having these conversations with my daughter,
Yeah.
and it's I think the creative space for young creatives right now is, man, it's going to be challenging. I'll be honest, I worry a little bit because Lily is focused on like animation, she's focused on illustration. um, and she has been to Google with me, and she's like, "Oh, I want to do what those, I want to work at Google. I want to, blah blah blah." I guess the thing that
Hmm.
I would say, and the thing that I say to my own daughter is like,
Hmm.
whatever you do, um, be hungry, be curious. Don't put your don't hang everything on this company. Don't hang everything on like what the tech industry is doing. Like, you have to have your own internal fire, and run after all of your curiosity, right? Like, don't I guess, again, I mean, and I don't even know if this is great advice, but like, the thing I was saying to Lily was like, if you just become I'm just this,
Yeah.
that's the thing where I think you you have to be willing to like just follow all of that creative curiosity. Like, to me, that's the basis. Then no matter what you get into, it's like that love of learning. It's like that
Hmm.
love of doing. Like,
Yeah.
really, like, focus in on that, kindle that. um and I think the other stuff will kind of fall into place. And whether you're in tech or whether you're somewhere else, I think there are opportunities still for ICs in tech, whether it's in, I mean, we did a lot of VR stuff. Unfortunately, that's all fallen to the wayside, but we still have a lot of like illustrators and, people who, are really creative who work at these companies, and I think
Yeah.
if you can find yourself into roles like that, there are places, but don't make that your life. That's not your, like, that is a learning experience to like feed that, that creative curiosity, and like use that, and don't be fine, like, you can leave that stuff,
Yeah.
and you let your work speak for itself, right? That, focus on like building your skill set. I guess this is a thing that I was always trying to focus on, was like, I wanted to be the best animator, the best illustrator, the best, designer, UI. Like, I wanted to do all of it. I wasn't
Yeah.
just like, I'm going to just focus on this.
Yeah.
And I think what that does is it sets you up to be a problem solver, for a variety of like potential problems like that are out there in the world, whether they're through tech or business or other things. Like, to me, that's the kind of creative I'm trying to like instill in my daughter. Is just like, start somewhere. That's fine. Start somewhere, but follow that creative curiosity. Follow it.
Pure magic, dude. That's
Yeah.
fucking putting this on the internet and that's out there. That's such great advice, dude. That's such great advice. I would say again, I fall into that for myself. I think what it gets a weird thing is like within tech is I don't, and it could just be of where I'm at, but I don't always know if that's encouraged. That's the difficult thing because sometimes it's the,
Yeah.
for me of I look at myself of like, oh, I want to be a master of these things again. Tools that I can do, or whatever this 3D design, product design, whatever that stuff. But it's more encouraged of like you need to learn to work the system. You need to learn how to go up for promo. You need to learn of how to do it. Da, da, da. And it's just like I could care less
Oh,
about any of that.
dude.
What I want to
100%.
be is I just want to be one of those individuals that the people I work with can depend on me, that when there's a need and they feel like I can execute on that, I'm going to execute at a high bar. Like
Yep.
that's all I care about. All that I care about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I sometimes feel like that's my experience in tech. Now, other like, from at Nike and all that, like different, but in tech, it's a lot of times of like, well, we're not going to give you your flowers for that. It's, you need to,
Yeah.
it's exposure. What are you attached to? What is your name? What are you owning? What is this and that? Because then that in turn for my manager, they're able to show like, well, all my, my staff is look at the, their impact on this. And it's just like, bro,
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I hear that. I totally hear that. And I guess the thing I'm thinking about is like the couple of things that I've tried to do at Google, and I think I've been lucky,
mm-hmm,
um, is that I've tried to bring that skill set to bear on the things that Google cares about. So, like for me, it was like storyboarding, sequential art, storytelling.
mm-hmm,
Again, this is why I say like when I came to Google, I was like I had no idea that I would be using that, but like dipping into that, I was able to like tell the story of how all of these pieces across our various like infrastructure teams fit together.
yeah,
So like it so I think you can sometimes find these opportunities to take what you have or
mm-hmm,
those skills that you have to bring them to bear on the problems that like a tech company has, which was different, very different than what like a company like Sports Illustrated
yeah,
had. That will not always work, and that's the thing is I've tried that. I've been on 4 or 5 different teams at Google, and it's worked on maybe 3 of the 5 teams.
right,
There were a couple teams where they were like, "What the fuck are you doing drawing pictures? Get out of
right,
here!"
right,
And I was like, and I was like, "Yeah, well, clearly this isn't the place for me."
right,
And so it was like so it's a little bit of like what I have found is like uh, if you can find those places where it's valued, where you can you know bring that skill set to bear in an environment where it's valued, right? It will be on you a little bit to be like, recognize this isn't it, this isn't working, and I need to make an adjustment. So, man, I mean, that was again a hard lesson for me. Like when I
mm-hmm.
joined, I think the Play Games team, I was like, all right, check me out. I do all this cool vision decks, and they were just like, yeah, we don't need that at all. And I was like, oh, okay, well, so
Yeah, I mean, I not to harp on it, but I feel like that is what these companies needs. I would agree with you. It's the ability to storytell and to very clearly articulate what your idea is. Because again, so many people are trying to solve the same problem.
yeah,
So it's at and God, and again, it's potentially my stupidity, but I go into these meetings, I'm like, I don't. You just spewed a lot of words at me, but I have no clue what your actionable plan is on this stuff. So the ones that then can articulate that and break it down, and you're like, oh, this makes sense, and I was able to follow you on that journey, and I
yeah.
get what you're trying to do, and so cool, I'm bought in. Let's do this is great.
Yeah.
you know
Man, you know what it has been for me, and it's interesting that you brought her name up, but Heather, and I hope Heather listens to this
I'm
because
sure she
Heather,
will.
yeah, Heather, I love Heather McDonald. She was just like, she's just awesome. But
Yeah.
I literally have this phrase that I will say to myself, which is like, what would Heather do? Um,
Mm,
and Heather, so sorry, I'll bring this back around to what we were talking about. But what
you're
Heather
good.
did was when she had a problem that she didn't
Uh-huh.
understand, she would create this document, and she usually called them a func spec, her
Uh-huh.
functional specification document. But what she would do is she would basically just start with nothing, with a blank
Hmm.
document, and she would start asking questions. And anything she didn't understand, she would highlight in yellow. And
Mm.
her whole job was to get all of the yellow out of this document. And so she would go and talk to people until the yellow was all gone. I don't
Love it.
understand what this is. And then she would like go, I'm going to meet with this person to answer this
Yep.
question, blah, 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 blah. So what I've done is I've tried to take that Heather, funk spec,
Yep.
kind of mindset about the way our team works, right?
Yeah.
Because you're right, it is so complex and there are so many pieces that
Hmm.
I have these documents now. Whenever I start a new team, I call them WTF.
Hmm.
Instead of a funk spec, I just call it what the fuck.
Yeah, Mark Maron's gonna sue you for that one. That's okay.
Right. Sorry,
Yep.
Mark.
That's okay.
But then what I do is I just go and try to answer every question I don't understand about, like, whatever this acronym is, or however
Mm-hmm.
this team is working, or what is this project, or when does it launch, who are the
Yep.
people, until I have enough of an understanding of, like, how this business works.
Yeah.
And then I'm in a position where I can start taking that and articulating to other people, do you realize you're missing this, or this is how these things should fit together, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so then so I start with the heather, with the heather document, and then I turn that into, like, some kind of narrative, or some kind of story, or some kind of vision. 18 months, this is how we're going to do it, and here's
Yeah.
how we'll back into it. So that's been my kind of recipe.
It's great.
I'm running that playbook right now,
Yeah.
for my team. And it's been, yeah, man, it's one of these things where I'm like, oh, okay, like, this is so stupid, and you
Yeah.
guys
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
be talking, and like, but that's my very dumb two-step process.
Yeah.
Do the,
How well received is this though? When you're identifying these gaps, are they like, Chris, we're not? Because
yeah,
you've told me stories of you'll have X, Y, and Z folks where you're like trying to plan a roadmap or figure out this, and how long you think it's going to take for this, and they're like 6 months, and you're like, you should be fired for what
yeah,
do you mean 6 months for
yeah,
this? Like it
yeah.
shouldn't, you know?
Yeah. There are some teams, again, and this would go back to my, like, if I'm on a team where I can't run this playbook, or I run into roadblocks, or I've actually run into, um, I've run into regulatory, like, legal roadblocks, where it's like, you can't ask these questions. Then I'm just sort of like, yeah, I'm not sure this is a place for me.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
know that this is going to. I don't know that this is going to work out. I mean, I'll still push, I'll still drive, but, like, if I continually run into these things, then yeah, I think that's probably an early sign that it's time to go somewhere else, because man, it's like, they're they can never be honest. They can never,
no,
like, truly, like, build great experiences and products, because they've created this, like, house of cards. Again, it goes back to that thing with the salespeople,
yes,
fear and lies.
yes,
If you're building a business around fear and lies, get the fuck out.
yeah.
Like, nope, that's not going to work. It's not a good environment for design. It's not a good environment for people. Just get the fuck out.
Well, I also there's like a certain level of responsibility I feel like that tech does not have anymore. Again, it's always been the mantra of like fail fast and whatever, but at a certain point, it's like, bro, like, do you got to kind of realize that the gravity of what some of these products are, that failing fast, it's not the smartest thing at all time. Like I mean, when I left, I got put over on that Bard team, and it was like they were in such a competitive mode with Chat GPT, and but the decisions that were being made, I mean, you like of a funk spec for that. I mean, holy moly,
Yeah,
like just the gaps, and you're
I
like,
know.
what are we doing?
Yeah,
It
yeah. Just
is,
making sense of some of that stuff sometimes is it's almost seems like an impossible task. But yeah, I mean, dude, this the
it's
whole,
a whole conversation on its own
yeah,
of
yeah,
dealing with
yeah,
that stuff.
yeah,
What
yeah,
young Chris, we're talking 16-year-old Chris. We're looking back, or we're looking into the future now. Is he pumped? Is he ticked? Where's he at on like we're old graybeard Chris's right now? What are we thinking?
yeah. It's not that bad.
No, it's not. You look
No,
fucking.
no,
I love the beard. The beard's fucking great, man.
no. 16 years old. Gosh, that's a great question. I mean, the answer to that question is probably 16-year-old Chris is pretty stoked that he's got a roof over his head, he's got a cute wife, and
Got them babies running around in the
got,
city. Yeah,
yeah, I don't know if he's as stoked about that, but living in New York City, yeah, that's pretty cool.
yeah.
I think 25-year-old Chris would be pissed off. Yeah, I
Mm,
think 25-year-old Chris would be like, come on, my dude.
I
Like,
like this.
I had this notion that by the time I got to 25, I was going to have my first Oscar. I was going to be like fucking, again, I'm like 19 years old being like, all right, let's get on this.
You're like you're the modern day version of like, oh, I'm just gonna be a YouTube celebrity sort of thing. Like I'm the next
Uh,
Mr. Beast, man. That's what
yeah,
like kids are.
exactly.
That was your version. Yeah.
Exactly. I was just like, and again, like, I now see this in my daughter, who is very hard on herself.
Uh-huh.
You know, and like it's like, how am I going to achieve greatness? And I'm like, oh, kiddo, pace yourself. You
Yeah,
know,
but that's gonna, you know it. That's gonna be with her for life. That
I
is,
know,
I
I
feel
know.
if you, I try to describe it to Lex sometimes. I go, the only way I can think about the weird, you know, self-deprecation, like beating up on yourself, and this, you know, it's like for people that love to work out. If you haven't worked, it is a. I said this wrong the last episode. It's an itch you need to scratch. I said just a
Yeah,
scratch you need to itch, which those two can whatever. But it is this thing where you're like, I will for the to the day I die. I have this like I cannot quench my thirst enough of
yeah,
just wanting to make stuff and get better at making stuff. And you know, the people that I look up to in these areas of wanting to be part of that cool crowd, and you
yeah.
know, and so your daughter's in the throes of it, man.
I know, I know. So yeah, I mean, like I think when I was 16, I was probably still playing with action figures as I way too late, you know.
Bro,
As
have you introduced the kids to LARPing yet?
don't.
Question number 3, right here in front of me. What did you get into LARPing? That's what I want to fucking know about.
That's through the comic book store, man. That. Not only did Scott, the comic book store owner, introduce me to Brian Stelfreeze, who changed the trajectory of my life. He also
Yeah.
introduced me to LARPing,
Oh God.
which is man, again, for a 16-year-old, no, I wasn't even 16. I couldn't drive yet. So I'm like 13, 14, 15 years old, like with a kid with a crazy overactive imagination. I mean, like, dude, the most embarrassing moment for me in my life, I'm just going to give you a little, a,
Little taste.
a little taste, is I am probably 14 or 15 years old. I'm
Yeah.
walking home from my very close friend, Jeff, from his house. It's
Yeah.
maybe a mile to my house. It is dusk. I can't see all that well. I am running down this hill, pretending I'm being chased by some kind of like enemy, and I'm turning around with my fake gun, and I'm like, and there in front of me is a landscaper's truck with the gate down. I run up the back of it's like green mesh. I run
Yeah.
up the back of the gate,
Yeah.
jump over the top of the car, slide down the windshield and the hood,
God.
fall on the ground, do a combat roll, stand up, shooting these monsters, and there is some, you know, landscaper who I didn't see standing 5 to 10 feet away from me, looking at me like, what in the fuck? And I just am like, oh. And I like full on cringe embarrassment, just like, oh God, and just run away. Ah! This is the stupid shit that I'm doing. Like, so, you know, for me, that was like going to these LARPing events or whatever was like, I mean, I couldn't fucking believe it.
Yeah.
I was like, you're going to give me a foam sword and I'm going to go attack these people who are dressed like goblins?
This is acceptable? Yes.
I am in. And that first day, man, we did it at Emory University. It was the first time I did it. They were running us through this module.
Uh-huh.
And they put us in the basement of some academic hall, completely pitch black, can't see your hand in front of your face. And there's this guy walking with us, and he's like, you're at the base of a cliff. The tide has gone out, and there was this old weather-beaten wooden door in front of you. And it's, you know, we're in a basement of a college, and I'm like, yeah, I see it. This is totally happening. And there's a lock. There's like a little, like, you know, Fisher Price lock. And my friend Jeremy is the thief. He has a set of, like, you know, paper clips are his lock picks, and he picks this thing. We end up going up these stairs, and this guy dressed in a skeleton outfit, glow-in-the-dark skeleton outfit, jumps down 2 flights of stairs and starts attacking us. And I'm like, yes, fuck yes. And I'm so, at that moment, I am so in. I'm like, yeah, I'm done.
I mean, you're the only one I ever know that got into LARPing, and I fucking love it, dude. It's so good. Did your character ever lord over anybody?
Well, so oh my God, I can't believe I'm telling you this. I hope that this never gets out. But my character's name, granted, I'm 13 or 14 years old, so give me a
Yeah.
break.
Yeah.
I dress in all black. My character's name is Obsidian Goblin Slayer. So my I can't believe I'm telling you this. I promised I would guard these secrets. Anyway, so I every time I saw a goblin, I just stopped what I was doing and I would go kill it.
Yeah.
And so anytime, but see, here's what happened is like as I got higher and higher level, I'm like whatever 10th level, and the way it works is like when you hit with your sword, you call out a number, and so you'd say like that's your damage number that you do. So you say 333.
Yeah.
But like I'm 10th level, so I'm calling like 8s or something like that. And goblins only have 8 hit points, so they would send out an army, a dozen of these goblins into the town, and they're for the low level characters to get experience. But I'm such an asshole. I'm like, I would run into the middle of these goblins, and they would be like friendly goblins. They would be like, "Oh, we are here to, blah, blah." And I'm just like 8, and they're all just and I'm just like, this is the greatest thing in the world. And of course, like the people who run the monster village are like, "You fucking asshole! What are you doing? You keep killing all these goblins. They're for the first level characters." And I'm like, I hate goblins.
Oh. So good.
So.
Did you see that LARPing documentary that was years ago?
I don't think I did. I mean, I've seen.
Hold on, I gotta look this one. Hold on, just really quick while I got you, because this was. I mean, every time this is one of my favorite movies. Which Lex will never watch with me. She's like, "You're insanity." Monster Camp.
No, I think I have heard of Monster Camp. Let me go look.
Dude, anybody that has not seen, it's such a good doc. I mean, American Movie is my favorite documentary ever, but this is right there. It's so good. I
haven't seen it.
This is young Chris. This is young Chris.
Absolutely. This is absolutely. Do you know where this was filmed?
I think it's Seattle. It's like somewhere in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay. Because it looks. I'm watching this and it looks like the time period that I was doing it. These are like the cabins that we stayed in. Mm-hmm. This is 100. This is it. This is what I was doing.
This is it. This is like, and then like the guy running it, God bless his soul, but like probably mid-50s, like severe arthritis, like The
cool thing though that happened is that during the summertime, what would happen is they would run a massive game of Assassin in Atlanta. So the people, like some of the people who were involved in the LARPing, so it would essentially, you could have up to 100 people in Atlanta playing Assassin, where you're trying to like kill people with squirt guns and water balloons.
That's crazy.
And it was amazing.
Yeah.
Like we would form these like hit squads, and we would go out on these summer nights, and we're just like trying to, we did like a stakeout on this guy who had a job. He had to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning, and we're like a bunch of kids home from college, and we just like waited for him to go to work.
Is he part of this, or you
he's playing.
Okay.
He's playing, but like we are chasing him down like the Highway 17 with water balloons, like throwing him at his car.
So good, dude.
Fucking dude. Oh, and the best story of all, we had a battle at this shopping center.
Yeah.
And there's like 10 of us, and we think these people are playing the game, but it turns out they're not. And my friend and I stand up. He hucks a water balloon, and it goes wide, and the girl rolls down her window to be like, "You fucking," and mine is right on target, and it's about 3 seconds behind, and it's at this moment that I realize like, oh, they're not playing the game at all, and it's just like boosh, I just nailed her right in the face. Anyway,
it's great with it, man.
Such great stories.
Well, buddy, I honestly, this is like fucking therapy for me. I could sit and talk with you for
absolutely. It's been so much fun, man.
You're the best, dude. Well, hey, man, thank you again for jumping on this. I've had you for forever, so But let's chat, man. I always feel like I don't know why we're not working on some stuff. We got to figure something out.
We got to do it. Nick.
I know, buddy. All right. Well, hey, dude, appreciate it.
All right. Love it. Thank you so much. I had a great time.
Thanks, dude.
If you could bleep out the obsidian part, that would be great.
We'll see what I could put in with that, maybe. Yeah.
All right.
All right, dude.
All right. See you, buddy.